class. In this video, we're going to talk about factoring where a is greater than 1. Before we get started, the definition for factoring basically is breaking down or dividing a number into its factors. The method a equals 1 that we're using today is going to be used for quadratic trinomials, which is shown here. The standard form of a quadratic looks like this expression that you see here. It's important to note that the degree of a quadratic is 2, and that means that's the highest power. The leading coefficient is a, and the constants are a, b, and c in this standard form. Now these are the steps that we're going to use to basically go over the example problems that I'm going to show you here today. So let's go ahead and get started with that. The first problem I want to go over is 3x squared minus 2x minus 8. If you look at this problem, it is a quadratic, right, because the degree is 2, right? And you can, if you look at this problem, the value of 3, 2, and 8, 3 is our value of a that we're talking about here in this form. This is the value of b. Actually, it's a negative 2 is the value of b, and the value of c is negative 8. So let's go ahead and go through these steps to solve, to factor this polynomial we have up here. Step 1, anytime we're factoring, we always want to check to see if there's a GCF to reduce or to factor out a GCF to make the problem a little bit easier. In this case, we're going to look to see if there's a greatest common factor between 3x squared, 2x, and 8, and there isn't any. So we're going to move to step 2, where we multiply the value of a times the value of c, and we're going to call that answer the value of d. So let's go ahead and do that. So this is step number 2. Right? In step number 2, we're going to take the value of a, which is 3, and we're going to multiply it times the value of c, and that's going to be equals to negative 24. And we're going to call that the value of d. Okay, we're going to assign that variable to it because we're going to need that for the next step. So let's look at step number 3. We're going to look for two numbers. When we multiply them together, we're going to get the value of d. And when we add the same two numbers, we're going to get the value of b. So we're going to look for two numbers. When we multiply them together, we're going to get the value of d, which is negative 24. And when we add those same two numbers, we're going to get the value of b, which is negative 2. After a few trial and error, okay, because this is usually the most challenging part of trying to find those two numbers, we're going to get a negative 6 and a 4. Okay? Sorry, just got a 4. So if we multiply negative 6 times 4, we're going to get a negative 24. And if we add negative 6 plus a positive 4, we're going to get a negative 2. It's important to note that other number combinations may not work when you multiply them together, like 2 and 12, because they won't add to 2. They won't add to negative 2. They might multiply to negative 24, but they won't add to a negative 2. Anyway, let's move on to step number 4. On step number 4, it says we're going to make two parentheses. Okay, and that's what this is all is saying. If you don't understand what it's saying, okay, we're going to make two parentheses, and the numbers that we found, okay, for step number 3 is going to go here. This is a negative 6, so we're going to say minus 6, and it's a positive 4. We're going to add 4 over here. And the variable that we use in our problem is x, and that's what we're going to put here. The next step is to divide whatever numbers that we put in these parentheses. We're going to divide this number and this number by the value of a. If we go back up here to the top, the value of a is 3. And that's what we're going to divide these numbers by, okay, which will bring us to our last step, which is our answer. Now, when dividing this, okay, when we get, let's look at 6 divided by 3. If we get a whole number, meaning a non-fraction or non-decimal, okay, we just write down the answer. We're going to rewrite this x here minus whatever the answer is goes here, which is 2. 6 divided by 3 is 2. Now in this particular instance, okay, when we divide 4 divided by 3, we're going to get a fraction or a decimal value, in which case when that happens, you're going to move this value in front of the x. So our answer is going to be here 3x plus 4. And that is it for that particular problem. So your answer here the factored form of this polynomial is x minus 2 times 3x plus 4. Now if you have any questions about any of that, go back, rewind, pause, fast forward, whatever you got to do so you can figure out what happened, what we did in these steps. Now let's look at another problem, and I'm going to erase this problem to make some room. Go ahead and erase this problem. The next problem is 6x squared plus 3x minus 18. And once again, okay, we're going to use a is greater than 1 factoring simply because we're looking at this problem and the value of a here is greater than 1. Okay, so this is going to be our a. Well, before we start, okay, let's look at the steps to see how we can solve this problem. Step 1 says check for a GCF, and if you look between this term, and this term, there is a greatest common factor between them, and it is a 3. So what we're going to do is we are going to pull out that 3, and we are going to write out what remains, the factor that remains, if we're going to pull out a 3 from each one of these terms. To do that, okay, we divide this by 3 and we get 2x squared. We divide this by 3 and we get plus x, and we divide this negative 18 by 3 and we get negative 6. So now what we have is we got this 3 sitting out here, and we got this polynomial sitting inside of the parentheses. And what's inside the parentheses is what we're gonna focus on, because this is a polynomial that we need to break down using a is greater than 1 factoring. All right. So here, if we look at this problem, now our a is this 2. Okay. And of course our b, you can't see it, but there's a 1 right there. That's our b, and our c is the negative 6. So that brings us to step number 2, which we're gonna do right here. All right. So we already checked for the GCF. We pulled it out. We did that. Okay. Now we're gonna multiply a times c to get our d. So we're on step 2. On step 2, and we are going to take the value of a, which is 2. We're going to multiply times c, which is negative 6, which is going to give us negative 12. And on the next step, we're going to look for 2 numbers. When you multiply them together, we're going to get the value of d, which is negative 12. And when we add those same 2 numbers, we're going to get the value of b, which is 1. So let's go ahead and set that up. We're going to look for 2 numbers, and when we multiply them together, we're going to get a negative 12. And when we add those same 2 numbers, we're going to get the value of b, which is 1. After some trial and error, the values that we got is going to be 4 and negative 3. 4 and negative 3. And those are the only 2 numbers that will work. Okay? So 4 times negative 3 will give us negative 12. 4 plus a negative 3 will give us a value of 1. And that which brings us to our 4th step, where this is what we're going to be doing, this step right here. Okay? So we're going to make 2 parentheses, and whatever numbers we found, we're going to put them in the parentheses. That 4 here, it's a positive, so we say plus 4. Here's a negative 3, so put a minus 3 here. And of course, the variable that we're using in this problem is the x, and that's what we're going to put here. All right? Now, once again, the 3 that we pulled out initially is still there. All right? So we're just going to kind of just put that here so we know that it's still there. It hasn't gone anywhere. All right? Right now, this is factoring this portion right here inside this parentheses. Let's go ahead and finish up this problem. So on this step also, what we got to do is we got to divide this number and this number by the value of a. The value of a in this parentheses is 2. So let's go ahead and put 2 right there, 2 right there. Okay? And like we did with the last example, okay, that'll bring us to our answer. And we're going to bring this 3 down that, you know, we're not doing anything with. Like we did with the last example, here we take the x plus 4 divided by 2 is a whole number. It's not a decimal or a fraction. So we're just going to write down the answer here. Okay? Now, however, this one, 3 divided by 2 will give us 1.5, which is a decimal. So what we will do in this case is we'll move this 2 in front of the x. So that'll give us 2x minus 3. This is the answer or the factored form of this polynomial. Thank you.